how does Bitcoin tie into all of this? Like, how does Bitcoin match up to the rest of,
And let's just go through them one by one real quick.
one by one?
How durable is Bitcoin?
So the durability of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a network, right? And so the way it works is that you have different computers, right? And these are like nodes in the network. And these nodes, they're all connected, right? They're all connected. And so the more amount of nodes you have, the stronger the network is, the stronger it is to hack. And it's because in order to hack it, you have to find, this is the whole thing with cryptography. We'll talk about it more. You will need to practically, let's just simply put, you need to hack one of these computers, right? But you need to hack one of these computers simultaneously, all of them at the same time as well.
Let me hold you. Let me bring it back real quick because you've been around this so long. I think you kind of understand it almost too well.
Okay.
In a sense of, so from someone who's relatively new to the world of Bitcoin, basically there are a bunch of computers that keep track of all the transactions of Bitcoin, and it is their collective information together that forms the ledger of what's happening in Bitcoin. And that means that no single computer owns the information of Bitcoin, right? And we'll get more on this later, but that's just like at a high level overview of what Mel was talking about, the peer-to-peer, the nodes that's working in the background of Bitcoin. So it would take, that's why he said you have to take over the majority of computers to take over the network, because no single computer owns the information of the network.
That's very true. Completely forgot we have not explained anything about what Bitcoin is, right? But the reason why it's durable is because in the 12 years or so, about, I think it's like 12, 13 years, it's never been hacked, right? And so then you also have
That's actually false. We'll go over that later.
Wait, time out.
You didn't read that in the book? It got hacked, and I can pull it up right. Keep going, and then I'll give me 2 minutes.
I just out here shooking my whole foundation. Okay, but based on my knowledge, Bitcoin has never been hacked, right? And so I think he's mentioning a double spend problem. So the reason why it's durable, sorry, I'm taking too long to explain this, but the reason why it's durable is because if the strength of the network makes it very durable, and the strength of the network is based on a whole bunch of computers having to shut down at the same time, which is very unlikely. And there's about 10,000 computers on the network. And two, the internet would have to shut down. And if those two things happen, we have much bigger problems than Bitcoin.
You're not wrong.
Number two, portability on your phones, internet, very simple.
Enough said there. By the way, for people who say that the 10 minutes or whatever for Bitcoin transfers to go through, and that's not fast enough, or like there are other Bitcoin, or there are other coins that do it better. That is such to me, it's such a BS. Like that's such a cop-out argument against Bitcoin, because it's 10 minutes. How long would it take you to transfer literally anything physical in the world to anywhere? I don't know. That's just me ranting, but I thought I'd put that out there.
And for some people, it'd be like, well, I can just do that on Venmo and PayPal, but we'll get more into why. Like,
not nearly as safe.
What it provides. But then also portability, there's going to be things that come out. Like the way I would think about Bitcoin is more as gold, and that there's going to be things that are put on top of Bitcoin to help you make that transaction faster. But portability, again, it's over the internet, super, super fast. Divisibility, when it comes to Bitcoin, people think like, oh my God, I have to buy one Bitcoin and it's like $64,000 or something, right? You don't. Bitcoins are broken down into like Satoshis, and these Satoshis are like, a Satoshi is the equivalent of 0.0000001 BTC.
And that's the decimal places is 8 decimal places.
8 decimal places.
So when you think of a penny compared to $100 bill is 1 out of 10,000, which is 4 decimal places. Mm-hmm. So that's twice the number of decimal places. That's very divisible. Most divisible we've ever seen, ever.
And I wish I could know off the top of my head what that would translate to in dollars, but the price changes too much.
Yeah.
Uniformity has to do like, well, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and this is verified through the code. And so that's very simple.
Right.
To limited supply. This is my favorite line about all of this, right? So obviously the value of something partially is derived from supply and demand, right? And right now we're in the super early stages. There's not the total amount of Bitcoin that's ever going to be created is 21 million. And this is hard coded into the protocol.
Yeah, it can never be more than 21 million.
And the only way it could change is if I believe it's about over 95% of the people holding Bitcoin. So everybody that has a stake in the network, they have to come to a consensus to say, or come to agree, that's what consensus just means, to say like we want to increase it, right? So and more the chances of that happening, we don't really know. But that's to tell you though, like even if it is to increase, it's something that everybody that is a part of it would
Which
agree
would
on.
suggest there's a really good reason for it. And if everyone is agreeing on it, then it really shouldn't be an issue anyways.
But in reality, most people are not really wanting to move that number because it's a lot easier for you to determine, value and everything if you know the certain amount, 21 million. And my favorite line about this is there's three things that are certain in life: death, taxes, and 21 million. So take that as you want. Accessibility, really, this is going to go further more when we start talking more about like more of the philosophical and the socioeconomic side of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is the first asset, and I want to quote this correctly. Is the first digital asset of value that can be transferred over the internet without any specific third party having to approve the transaction or being able to deny it. So,
And that's really, really key. The fact that there's no singular entity, there's no centralized authority governing Bitcoin is revolutionary. It's one of the greatest technological inventions that we've ever seen. Even as someone who's, as you know, somewhat skeptical of new technologies, even Bitcoin to this day, I do think that aspect of Bitcoin is unbelievably useful and unbelievably genius.
And I want to say, because the definition of accessibility you gave was how well do people accept it, right? So currently, right now, it's still not fully accepted as a payment. In terms of not a lot of companies are now starting to pop up and say, we're gonna accept Bitcoin, blah blah blah. But to me, acceptability and another thing is accessibility. So everyone has access to this, and as more and more people begin to adopt it, because there's no restriction. There's no one telling them they can't have that. It's simply just inevitably going to be accepted by everybody.
Right.
Transactions happening that aren't with, anything just having to say, I guess, with like the government or having to do between like business. If people just want to send money over to someone in a different country, they can just send Bitcoin and that will be accepted. And the reason why it is being accepted is because the value has gone up tremendously, and we'll talk more about it. But I confused a bit of accessibility and acceptability there.
He was saying acceptability, like accept. I hope I articulated that.
Yeah,
accept.
No, you did say it correctly. But accessibility is very interesting.
One side note, a little tangent. Bitcoin was hacked, and it was, and let me pull up my notes real quick. It was hacked. The Bitcoin protocol was hacked August 15th, 2010. You can look this up. Basically what happened was there was a bug in the code, so probably not going to happen again, but there's a bug in the code, and someone hacked Bitcoin to the tune of 184 million BTC. And luckily they forked it, so a large part of the network decided that they would basically fork the blockchain, which we'll go over what that means later. But essentially that transaction was nullified, and so it did not go through, and it is not it just basically didn't happen essentially in the terms of the blockchain, but it did get hacked, and that did happen. So thought I'd let you guys know.
And I would say that was very early in the time when there wasn't as many nodes in the network to secure it.
So, August 15th, 2010 was about a year and a half after Bitcoin was released, because it was released January 6th or 3rd of 2009. And now it's 2021. So
it's held its own for about, 11 years now. So I would still say pretty safe, pretty durable. But last but not least, hit over the functions of Bitcoin. So how does Bitcoin match up in terms of a medium of exchange, right? So like I mentioned before, it's the first digital asset of value that can be transferred over the internet without any specific third party having to approve the transaction or able to deny it, right? So this means that regardless if the government, no matter what, I could send you Bitcoin,
right,
and you can send it back to me, right? So in terms of our merchants, our stores going to accept it, that's a different story. That probably is going to happen down the line. But as a medium of exchange, me and you can exchange value with Bitcoin, right? And so...
just one interesting note that you put on here was that Bitcoin is not widely used in the U.S., which is true, but is heavily used in Nigeria, Southwest Asia, and Latin America. And the reason that's important is because, as we talked about earlier, if people are using a currency that even though you don't value, if they value it, it's actually valuable for you to use their currency as well because it's valuable to you, as we talked about earlier. Okay. And so the fact that other countries are heavily using Bitcoin is important because it is a sign of things to come, possibly. So
And
just to let y'all know.
and a big reason why those countries are specifically using it is because their government have been massively devaluing their currency. So whatever currency that Nigeria uses, or those Southwest Asian countries and Latin American countries like Venezuela, like those countries are losing. They're in hyperinflation where the value is being lost at like it's like over like 50+%, which is absolutely insane. So in terms of medium of exchange, Bitcoin isn't fully there. We, as in someone in the community, we have to accept that Bitcoin isn't fully there in terms of when they're talking about, going and paying for stores. But as of right now, in 2021, as we speak, it is rapidly taking over and becoming very popular.
Especially
in our
as our
generation.
prophet, Michael Saylor, who Armel recognizes as Jesus of Bitcoin, as he keeps spitting truth, it is growing rapidly.
Number
Number two.
store value. So Bitcoin's performance over this year is 293%.
Meaning it increased its value by 293%.
293%. Yeah, like Ben said. And that is the equivalent of about like 3xing, whatever. So let's say you put $100 Bitcoin last year, now it would be worth around,
Is that 3x or 4x? Because isn't 100%? Yeah.
Is double. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's 4x.
Yeah.
That's 4x. And so that would be worth $400 now, right? And so as a store of value, it's very questionable. People like to say like, okay, well, in that time period where it's increased about 300%, it's had its ups and downs, right? So it's gone up like 50, gone down like 10.
Such is life.
And literally in days, I look at my coin, I get notification Coinbase. It's like Bitcoin's up 5%, Bitcoin's up 10%, Bitcoin's down 5%, so when people are talking about store of value, like I don't really know if I want my money to be that volatile. I don't know if I want my wealth to be tied to something that goes up and down that much. If you're much older, which most people that are listening are not, of course it makes sense. Like you're close to your age of retirement. You want to be able to know that you can pull out this money and it'd be relatively the same. So that's why you go into much more safer things, right? But when you're thinking long term and you know the fact that 21 million is certain, this gives more comfort knowing that I know that the supply of this money will never change. And once you reach the point where 21 million is out, you will see a lot more stability in the price, because in terms of demand, and this is my guess, that by that time it will be held by so many institutions, it will be held by governments. And I do want to say this, El Salvador is the first country that made Bitcoin legal tender, and they're starting to stockpile reserves of Bitcoin.
That's really big, guys. I mean, a whole country stockpiling Bitcoin. We already have corporations, the chief of which being the one that Michael Saylor runs, or he's the CEO of. I'm not sure which what he owns. MicroStrategies, and maybe you haven't heard of it, but it's a Fortune 500, right? Mm-hmm. And they have a few billion, maybe.
They have about, it's roughly around $3 billion worth.
So this is something that you kind of have to look out for. It's not there yet, but the key word is yet. And I'm not saying it will or won't be. I'm just saying it's something you should pay attention to, because if you can catch it on the rise now, not saying that you should, because this is not financial advice, but if it's something you're interested in, maybe consider putting in a little bit of money if you would like to.
And we'll